Through. Welcome to this introduction to Mojolicious. I'm Marcus Ramberg and I'm one of the core developers of the Mojolicious framework. And this is my second Mojolicious introduction. The first one was in 2010 for Mojolicious 0.99922. So we got a little bit further since then. I will start with a little bit of meta about this talk. So Joel Berger, another core member, was kind enough to allow me to use his slide stack for this presentation. So he held this talk for the first time for Chicago PM in February 2013. And then he updated it in March for Milwaukee Brew City Perlmongers. So I forked it and updated it for you guys at YAPC. And if you want to find the slides afterwards, the talk is hosted at marcus.nordoc.com/Mojolicious introduction. And you can get the whole source at github.com/MarcusRamberg/Mojolicious introduction. And all of the code samples and all the tests that I'm going to show in this talk are complete and run as shown in the talk. And they are all included in the repositories. You can check it out yourself later and try the code samples. Anyways, if you like what you see and you want to find out more later, you can go to our website, Mojolicious, or just mojolicious.org if you prefer. I recommend checking out the guides there. Start with the Mojolicious slide guide, and then you can work your way through the growing guides, the routing, and the rendering guides. And they contain a lot of useful information. The cookbook is also full packed with nice receipts for things that you can use Mojolicious for. There's also a set of podcasts at mojocast.com. You should start at episode 1. If you just go to the front page, you will get the latest one. They are a little bit dated, but they are still very good if you like that format for introductions. It's like a screencast, and Glenn did a very good job on them. Or you can come talk to us at in the Mojo channel on irc.perl.org. Or if you don't like real-time chat, we have a mailing list as well. So enough of the meta. Let's get started with the actual introduction. Mojolicious is our amazing real-time web framework that you can use to build web applications. It's a powerful web development toolkit, and it's been designed from the ground up based on the experience from Catalyst development. Both me and Sebastian were involved since the start of the Catalyst project, and we used everything that we learned from that process when we built Mojolicious. It's portable. It runs on every modern Unix stack basically, and now it also runs fine on Ubuntu Windows. So there are no non-core dependencies, at least for reasonably modern Perls. If you run the older versions, there might be. There are some optional dependencies for things like socks and SSL and the event loop. And it comes with everything you need to create a web application. We'll go through some examples soon. It's fully real-time and non-blocking, so you can use asynchronous communications, and it's perfect for building highly scalable web services. As of last week, there was 8,706 lines of code in lib, and 11,415 tests that cover those lines of code. So the 92.8% test coverage is due to some of the pre-forking code being quite difficult to do actual unit testing for, but it's very well covered in general. So from a brand new Mac or Linux machine, you can bootstrap Mojolicious just with this one-liner. You can just do curl cpan minus and then pipe Perl minus cpan hbs cpan meta cpan org, and then name Mojolicious. And you can also use this to just bootstrap cpan minus and then just install it to cpan minus. You probably want to have cpan minus anyways. So this is the way. If you do it this way, it's quite secure, and it's using HTTPS in both steps. So once you have it, you can create a simple hello world application. This is maybe some of the simple things you can do. Just load the Mojolicious slide class, create a root, and start application. So when you do the use line, it will automatically import strict warnings and UTF-8 and 510 features for you. And the Amni thing handles the root for just /root, and it will render the text that we saw. And start will start the application, which means that it will take a command for you from the command line. So that means you can run it with just as a script with Perl script name, or if you have put in a shebang on top, you can just do it like in the example. And then daemon will start up a simple server on port 3000. When you're doing development, it's nice to use Morabo. It's like a auto restarting server, so it will be watching your files as you work and automatically reload as you go. For deployment, I prefer to use Hypnotoad, which is also built in to the Mojolicious stack. It's a high-performance pre-forking server, and it has a really nice feature that lets you do zero-day downtime upgrades, where it just like ports a new master and then sets up a new set of children to listen on the same socket as the existing one. So to use that, you can just use Hypnotoad script, or if you want to run it in the foreground, you can use Hypnotoad -f script. If you already have Plack or PSGI in your stack, you could use Plackup or Starman to run Mojolicious scripts as well, but then you don't get any real-time features because the IO loop will not be running. So that's a downside of that approach. And it's even possible to run Mojolicious as CGI. It has fairly fast startup time, so it's feasible. But why would you if you don't have to? Yeah, so I'm going to show a little bit of a more comprehensive hello user script. It will handle all the top-level routes, including /Joel, or the route will be special case world. And we're going to stash any route matches that we make, and some other useful values, and render a template with a layout. And all the stash values are localized in the template to Perl scalars. So let's look at how that looks. So the same use line to load the Mojolicious file script, and we set up a route similar to our example here, but now we take one name parameter. So the colon here says that anything, it's a placeholder to say that anything that goes into name will be set to the name stash. And so that we will handle the route, we also set a default to world. And we get the self, and we stash time into to scale local time to get time string, and then we render the hello template. So in this example, the templates are just included inside the file, which can be nice if you're making like a really quick script. You can also just put them in a templates folder, but for my examples here, I'm just going to use them embedded in the data section. And then the Mojolicious render automatically finds the file spaced with @ and then the file name, and then anything down to the next @ is the contents of that file. So for this example, I'm going to show an actual basic layout. So you can see here that we set a title, and we have a body tag, and then whatever's inside the actual template of the renders goes in where the content is there. For the remaining templates that I'm going to show, we will just use the default basic layout, which is built in, so you don't have to include it like this. This layout command tells it to use this wrapper, so you don't need like a header or footer. It will just wrap the content automatically. And then the title helper sets title into the stash, and then we get it back out here using the same title helper. We'll render the name that we pass in as hello name, and then we use a tag helper to create a P block here, and then write the time is now time, which is the other thing that we stashed here. Well, so let's look at how that looks when we're running it. I've started it already here. No, that's turned wrong. Come on. Perl x hello daemon. All right, there we go. So now we have the daemon running, and we just connect to port 3000, and it says hello world. The time is now, 11:35. And if you pass a parameter, you get hello Perl conference instead. So that works as expected, and now it's time to see how we can test this. Of course, it doesn't work until you test it, so we will write a simple unit test. We just use load Mojo base strict to get the same modern functionality and use strict, and then we load test mover and or test mojo class, which is what we use to test on the Mojolicious application. And since it's a light app, we just require it like this, and then we can test and do some tests on it. So here we're doing a check to see that we can actually do a request, and that response status is 200, and then we just do some content, some regexes on the content, right? So and same for Joel. Here we can actually see that we get the expected hello Joel back, and similar like that. So if you go and run that with prove, you can see that it will run the test, and it will do debug output here, so we can see that it's getting root and rendering and the templates as expected, and then the tests pass. Yeah. So for as I mentioned, for a light application, you need to require the file, and you could even for some tests just like define a simple light application in the test unit itself if you use Mojolicious Light. But if you're using it for a full application which supports different controllers and stuff, you just pass the class name to the constructor of test mojo. And so the test status and test response content, like I showed you. So yeah, the test we did were maybe a little bit primitive. We're just checking the whole body to match regexes, and there's actually a better way to do that. But first, we're going to look at the side. So Mojo ships with a full DOM implementation called Mojo DOM, which gives you the power of CSS3 selectors. It's a pretty relaxed HTML XML parser. It will do pretty much the same job as a browser does to parse any XML-ish structure, and it will allow you to do any CSS3 selector that makes sense on the server side. Of course, you can't do like hover because it's really hard to find hover without a mouse. But pretty much everything else, you can check out the list of supported selectors in Mojo DOM CSS. And if you just want to get the first element returned from your selector, you can use at, which will return Mojo DOM or mdef if it doesn't match anything. Or if you want to iterate over a set of over a set of elements, you can use DOM find, which returns a Mojo collection. A Mojo collection is basically just a blessed array, or blessed array ref, which provides methods like first or last or each to let you easily work with arrays. But you could also just access it directly by dereferencing. So here's a simple code example that shows how this works. I don't think I'm gonna run this because it's kind of self-evident. So this thing creates a HTML structure, and then we feed that to the constructor of Mojo DOM, and we get the DOM object back, and then we can do something like matching the something class here, right? This is the same as you would do when you write CSS.something p, and then we match the important text here, which is what we get out, and everything else is ignored. So people have said you can't actually parse Perl with a regex, but it turns out you can do it pretty well if you just write enough tests, and that's the approach that Mojo DOM takes. And it's yeah, so we can use this to test the hello user script with the selectors. Many test Mojo methods take selectors, and you can use all the power from Mojo DOM, Mojo JSON, and Mojo user agent to match content in your tests. So here's the updated version of that test script, and we can see the same boilerplate, just set to your environment, load the test modules, require the script, hello PL, and then we create a T object. And then now you can use the text is method, for instance, to say, I want to match the first P of this content. Remember, it uses at, so it will return the first element if there are several. And that one should be hello world. And then we're doing a little bit more of an advanced selector here, where we're doing the nth type selector to get the second P in our content body, right? And that will match the time that we get back from local scalar local time. And then with Joel, we can do the same again to test that the P is hello Joel. Yeah, and like with any test script, you just end the script with done testing to tell the test more that you're finished. Yeah, so Mojolicious also provides a concept called helpers, which are methods that are available on both your application controller and inside templates. So these templates, they are like exposed directly as functions inside Mojolicious templates, and they can be bundled and distributed as plugins on CPAN. And we also ship with several templates. We have, for instance, you can, for instance, use the app helper from the default helper to get the application object, or you can use C to create a collection out of something, or B to get the byte stream, and several other things like that, or like an include helper to include another template. Just look at the Mojolicious plugin default helpers, Perl docs, to get the whole list of supported things there. And the tag helpers we already saw an example of with P. We have a lot of different ones like form for and label for and text input and submit button, which lets you write the sticky forms really easily. That's usually what I use it for. Mojolicious also has some session support, and that's a client-side session which is automatically stored in the browser's cookie. So we just sign the cookie with the content, which means that you have a secret. You make sure to set this secret to something other than secret, otherwise your session might not be secure. Mojolicious also supports session secret rotation, so that you can have one secret still being active for all sessions, but all new sessions signed with another one, just by putting an array of secrets into the secret hash. So with these skills, we're going to make a simple logging application example. So here we're creating our own helper, a validate helper, and it takes two arguments, a username and password. And for this simple login application, I'm just storing my users in a hash, and Joel and my pass is the only valid user. So we're going to return unless the user in that hash has the requested password. Otherwise, we're going to set the user as a user in the session hash. And then here is the request. So the self-param method in a malicious controller automatically returns params from placeholders and from query parameters and posts. So you can just mash them up. But if you want to get a specific one, they are available either as in stash or on the request object as well. So in this case, we just match, and if we have a username, then we will try to call the validate helper here to make sure that we can log in. And then we will just render the index template. We could have just put the render call here as well and put the template in as a last argument for any. And so that we can get a full round trip in, we're going to add a logout action as well. So this just sets expires to 1, but you could also, if you have other things in the session and you don't want to invalidate your whole session, you could just set the user to undef as well to make a login and delete the user item from the hash. Since this is the only info thing here, we can just set the expires flag to expire the session. And then we redirect back to this one. So here is the relevant template, and here you can see I've dropped the basic template layout, so it will just use the one that's bundled with Mojolicious. And the session is, and we get the username from the session. And if we have one, the title will be welcome back user, otherwise we'll just say not logged in. And then if we don't have a user, we will present the login form like this. So here you can see the tag helpers that I told you about. So input tag here gives you a user input field, and the password field is called pass, and the submit button. If we start this, and then no, we get the login form. And so if we try to use this one, it will not log in, but yeah, no, not really. Yeah, okay, so now we're logged in, and if we hit the /logout endpoint, then we're back out on the front page. So let's look how to test this, but first we need to learn a little bit more about Mojo User Agent. So Mojo User Agent is a fully featured user agent. It's like a modern version of LVP, basically. It has a built-in cookie R. It handles redirects and WebSockets, and it has SSL and proxy support built in. You can use SOX proxy just by setting the correct environment. And it can also parse the content that is returned as XML or JSON with the DOM and JSON response methods. It supports pluggable content generators, so that you can, built in, we ship with a form generator and a JSON generator. So you can just pass JSON and then a hash, or form as a hash, and it will automatically create a request body for you. And it supports non-blocking if you provide it with a callback. So here is a simple example of a user agent script. So you can see all of the scripts that I'm showing here has the file name here in the bottom. So if you want to find it later in the repository, you can. Let's see. This is UA example. So you can see that it gets the latest version of Mojolicious, which is now 7.39 from the MetaCPAN API. And then it creates a URL for Open Library and gets all of the Perl books there. And you can see that the first one is learning Perl. So that matches what we see here. This one sends a request to Fast API via release Mojolicious, and then it returns the JSON version. While here we construct a URL with the Mojo URL object. We add a path and a query parameter, and when we get that URL, we can use a JSON pointer to find the first work, and then we print the title from that one. JSON pointers is very handy for navigating deep JSON structures. So now that we have a little bit more information about Mojo user agent, we can use that to test the login example. So we want to test that the form is only shown when you're not authenticated, and we want to generate a form from a hash and then follow the logout redirect. So that looks like this. This is the same boilerplate as all our previous user tests, setting up a $T object, and then we make sure that the bundled user agent that's available on TUA has max redirect set to 2, so that it will actually follow redirects. By default it won't, so that you can actually test that the return call is 301, but if you set the max redirects, it will just transparently follow it. And so we get the root here, and we see that we have the correct title. H1 returns not logged in, and there is a form element. Then we create a login hash with our username and password, and post that as a form to the root. We get back 200, and now the text says the H1 contains Joel. And we don't have a login form anymore. Finally, we just get the logout action, and that one transparently follows the 302, which means that the status will be 200, and we have a form again. Let's try to run that, and in the let's. Yeah, so here you can see, again, it does what you expect, and we see the debug output, that's the renders index template. The post here, that does the login, and then we check that the status code is okay, selectors, and then the logout action. So here you can see the transparent redirect, it's a 302, and then it gets the 200. Yeah. So now we're going to look at content manipulation. So Mojolicious is very good for writing RESTful application, and RESTful applications often support many different formats for the same action. We have a respond to helper, which this automatically detects the requested format that the user wants, if it's JSON or text or XML or whatever, and then it renders that format. And we also have a couple of useful helpers here, which is a not found helper, which will render a 404, and our exception helper, which will render a 500. Of course, that will also automatically happen if your script dies unexpectedly. So we create a simple data hash here to work with, and then we create a root with one placeholder, the ID placeholder. We check that the data we get in a stash here from ID actually exists in the hash over here, otherwise we just return early with a 404. And then we do a respond to. If the user requested the text representation, we will just join the elements in the hash with a comma. Otherwise, with the JSON, we just render item as you can see it. Or the fallback for any other representation, we'll just use the renderer to render the HTML format with the page template. And it will stash the item so that the template can access it. So let's look at that template now. You can see we do app start, and then the template is here. We get the key from the $foo hash that we passed in, and then we set the title to you wanted key, and the layout to basic, which is using the built-in layout, and then we have a paragraph like this: all your base belong to foo. So let's try running that. Content. So refreshing the front page here, we'll get out as a 404 because we only respond to this route. If you pass 1, it will do the HTML representation. If you do TXT, we get the TXT representation. Or if you do JSON, yeah, it's not so easy to type with your back turn. Yeah, there we go. So then we get the just serialized version of this hash item. But we want to test this as well. So you can test for formatted response either either it will use like the default, or you can set a query parameter just to say which format you want, or you can use extension like I showed you to just use .json or .txt. And Mojolicious also supports the accept header, so that you can ask for representation in the accept header. And we're also going to test the 404. So same boilerplate and creating a T object. So a non-existing item gives us a 404 status. Getting 1 gets us the HTML representation, and it has a paragraph with foo and bar in it, right? If we ask, if you use in the query format, you can use format equals txt, and it will automatically set the content to bad, or the one that we already shown using .json will show with the one element here. Will show we can use JSON is to match a JSON structure as a Perl structure automatically. So you can see that it's the same structure with foo bar. Or we can use JSON is like this, passing in a JSON pointer to say that the bas element should contain bat. And here you can see that we're passing on to the GET request a header, the accepts header, which this tells Mojolicious that it should be using this representation. And done testing as usual. So I hope this is you're starting to see how this can be useful, but we're going to look at a couple more things. So I promised you that we're going to have a real-time framework, right? And so far everything has been very synchronous. Let's try to knock it up a little bit and write a pod website that requests module documentation from Meta-Sapan asynchronously, and it does not block, so you could do any number of pages at the same time, and it will wait to render a response. This can be very useful if you're having a microservices-oriented architecture where you have many small web services around, and you can use Mojo to compose from all of those in parallel without having to do alt requests. So here we create a new user agent, and then we pass in the URL to fast API meet.cpm.org/pod, and we say that we want the content type to be text HTML from the API. And then we match any module, and like the user example here, the placeholder column module defaults to Mojolicious. So if you don't specify which pod you want, you will just get Mojolicious. As I said, this is happening asynchronously, so we don't want Mojolicious to trigger its auto-rendering, which we tell it with the render later action. So we get the module from Stash, and then we clone the URL so that we don't modify it for every request up here. And we set the path to that module. So since this is an absolute path and the module is relative, it will just be appended after the pod here. And then we get that URL, and we provide a callback. So if you need to do more complex things like that, you should be looking. We could use that delay helper to compose a row of requests, or even several URLs that we want to do in parallel, and then we could trigger an action like this rendering at the next step. But for the simple one, we just want to render the docs template, and we provide the pod. We stash the pod from the TXRS body that we get back, and then we have a template like this, very simple, just the title and the module name, and then we give the whole unescaped. We use these double signs to say that Mojolicious should not escape the content, so that we can get actual literal HTML. By default, it will stop it so that you don't get content injection. But in this case, we want to have the straight HTML. So if we run that one, NB, yeah, Perl X NB doc server, and then we just get the front page. So then there's the HTML fetched in without blocking, and that means that inside your daemon, any number of requests could be running in parallel. Another nice side effect of this non-blocking support that we have means that we can also do WebSockets. A client can open a WebSocket and the server will respond with data every second. The client preserves data and updates the plot, and the one that I'm going to show you is only using some simple built-in data, but you could like fetch data from anywhere and render it real time to the user. So here we have a request Annie. Here I show you how to specify the template without any. This one doesn't need any controller action, so it just says the root will render index template, and then the data will be a WebSocket. So here we're setting up a timer to do something every second. So every second we are increasing I by 1 and then sending a JSON structure generated by this gen data function based on the $I seed. And when the connection is closed, the Mojolicious should automatically remove the timer. So here's the function. It's just doing a simple it returns the number itself and a simple transform. And our templates are pretty much trivial as well. Loading jQuery and jQuery plot, and we create a plot thingy. And we're using one of the tag helpers here to create a JavaScript block, which fetches the data from this URL. So here we're using a URL for helper to get the data endpoint and the absolute URL, and we create a new WebSocket, and every time we get a message, we render that. So back into demo mode. Yeah, so now we can see that here we have the first item, and as we get the number 3 and number 4, you can see that a random number is automatically generated. Here it has just like got the root, and then it got the data section, and it's switched to using the switching protocol to set the WebSocket mode, and it keeps like rendering this on forever, and the graphs gets more and more compressed until we break the socket. Yeah. So testing this is also very easy. Mojolicious Test Mojo has full support for WebSockets, so you just send a message, wait for a response, test that response. If it's a JSON response, you just use the JSON pointer, and then just repeat or finish. You can also like test conversations by sending something, waiting for a response, sending something else. But for our simple thing, all we need to do is just test that we actually get data back. So we're testing the front page and make sure that it has this element that matches plot. And then we're setting up the WebSocket here using WebSocket OK to /data. We check that we get a message. We check that the message contains 0 for the first element, and then it has a second element. And then we get another message and check that that message is message 1. So the first message is 0 and the second is 1. So then we're pretty happy. We can also do validation using the Mojolicious framework. This is the last thing I'm going to cover on the web application. So now we're doing, before we did a login example, and now we'll do a registration example. So we get the validation object from self-validation. This is built into Mojolicious using Mojo validator. And then if we don't have data in the validator, we just render a template. Otherwise, we check that we have the required user parameter, which is from 1 to 20 characters and matches this regular expression. And if we have an optional password element of size 7 to 500, then we make sure that we also have a required pass again, which matches. So that if you enter password, it should repeat as well. Finally, we're setting up the session. And then if the validation is correct, then we just set users to self-param. We do the logout action here as well for completeness, and then here's a template. So the tag helpers will automatically set field with error class on any label that it doesn't pass validation, which means that we can just put a color on that to show how the validation failed. And for this example, we get the root and create a form with a user, pass, and pass again, and these labels will automatically turn red when the validation is invalid. Yeah, and the test here is just as easy. We just do $registration and pass in the form. Check that we have an invalid field because we didn't provide the login thing, and then we pass in a correct one, and we can see that we get the header back as register as Marcus. Finally, we do the logout to complete the loop. Mojolicious also provides a lot of command line things. You can use Mojo-get to get content from the internet and just like do CSS selectors. So in this example, we will get the red Perl ready, and we fetch the title for every item and output them very easily. And on the second one, we can use a JSON pointer to get the lines of code in Mojo base, or from your own application, you can get root and then just to dump out the text of the first paragraph, or actually the second paragraph because it's 0. So there's also a lot of other commands. If you just run the script without any parameters, it will show you all the available built-in ones. But one of the very handy ones is roots. This will show you all of the defined roots in your application. Or you can even use eval to run some ad hoc code against your command. -v will just print out the output of this thing. So WebSocket PL eval means v app home will print out the value of app home. If you use uppercase V, it will use data dumper to dump the whole Perl structure instead. So if you have a complicated structure in your application, you can just use that. We also provide a bunch of content helpers, so you can create like a simple generic light app by just doing Mojo generate light app, or Mojo generate app, which will create a whole tree with the example controller and tests and base application. And if you want to make a plugin, you can use Mojo generate plugin to create one of those as well. And if you provide it with the name of the plugin or application afterwards, it will use that, or otherwise it will fall back to some default. You can also add your own commands to Mojolicious. For instance, you could do like Mojo no paste. I'm going to show you that's actually a module that you can download in cpan, which provides that command. Or you could add things to your own application. For instance, in Convos, we have Convos installed to automatically install dependencies. Or in Joel's Galileo, you can use Galileo setup to set up your CMS. And the minion, the worker queue that Mojolicious provides, also adds a minion worker command automatically to your application. So one last thing that I want to show you, Mojo file. This was added pretty recently in the new version of Mojolicious. And it collects all of the file-based operations that we provide in Mojolicious. I often use this just for simple script hacking on the command line, which sometimes has nothing to do with the web. And it provides, for instance, path and temp file. It's faster than file tiny, and it has some nice differenting features. So here you just get the path for itsy password there, and then slurp it in, and then you have the password. You have your password file and all passwords. Or you can create a temp file with a temp file function, and then Spurt writes content to it, right? So it's slurp and Spurt. It's like symmetric. And you can use move to move it into another folder. There's also a lot of functions to iterate over folder structures and things like that to like get all of the files in the folder and do something with them. So Mojo also supports something called a module called Ojo. So that means that you can use it like this, from -Mojo, because M loads the module obviously, and then you can use a bunch of handy single character functions. So for instance here. We're creating a file called GeoJSON with the F helper, which returns a Mojo file object. and then we write the content of this URL. We just this will do a GET request and return the body. So we get free GUIP in .NET, JSON Mojolicious org, and then we take the body of that and put it into that file, and then we slurp it back into a scaler, which is parsed by the J helper, which will take a JSON string and create a Perl hash from it. And then finally, the R helper will just do data dumper. So if you try to run this example, it automatically gets the content from that URL and dumps it back out again as a Perl hash. So if you like what you've seen here, I would also recommend checking out Mojo PG, which is a wrapper on dbdpg, which lets you do more convenient database things. It supports things like migrations and async database communications. So it can be really useful in a Mojolicious application. Mojo Redis 2 is a driver for Mojolicious to talk to the Redis data storage, and Minion is the official job queue of the Mojolicious project, and it's like a side project maintained by Sebastian as well. Galileo is a CMS system that you can use to create content on the internet, and Convos is a IRC chat client that me and Batman back there made. It's an in-browser based IRC client, and it's kind of handy. You can load it on your mobile or on desktop, and you will have the same persistent connection because it keeps connection on the server side, and then as soon as you connect, it uses WebSockets to tell you what's happening. There's also Mojolicious plugin Asset Pack, which will compress and convert CSS, CLS, SAS, JavaScript, and CoffeeScript files. That's basically a pipeline. So it will compress all of your CSS into one file, even if you have a bunch of them, or all your JavaScript into one file for efficiency. Mojo Phantom is a driver that will easily let you test your application, including JavaScript. And the Mojolicious plugin mount PHI lets you mount a non-Mojolicious application inside a Mojolicious one. So if you have a PSDI application, you can just put that on some root inside your Mojolicious application. And similarly, test Mojo role PSGI will let you test a non-Mojolicious application with Test Mojo, even with Phantom. So this can be super handy. And finally, the no-paste one that I showed you. So thank you for listening, and you have 3 minutes for questions. So does anyone have anything that they want to know?
Are we using include to include external or secondary templates?
Yeah.
Is there a way to interpret variables inside so you can run it as file or something instead of, because right now I'm just doing include with the loop file with the loop, and then instead of doing an if in my template.
Not sure I understand the question. You want to do an include localized or
a conditional include?
A conditional include. But I think you could just use the include helper and do a if before or after it. Include this thing if it's just Perl. So the include thing is just a function in the.
Yeah, there was a reason why I couldn't get like the 2 layers down to interpret variables or interpret specific.
Okay, let chat me up afterwards and I'll explore. Any other questions? Yeah?
Thank you, Marcus. You mentioned that you handle high performance between async and pre-forking. And you also said that the server auto-reloaded the configuration automatically.
Yeah.
How does it work? Does it keep the PID? Because like for things like Docker, your main process gets killed, your containers.
No, it doesn't. So if you want to run inside Docker, you would prefer to use the pre-forking server and then just restart the Docker container. And basically, you want your Docker container to be immutable. So if you're going that approach, I would.
Which one is that? You mean Apache or you mean?
No, I just mean Mojo server pre-fork. Okay. You can use a parameter to the daemon flag to make it use pre-fork, right? That's how you do it. Yeah.
These examples, where are they?
Yeah, they are on my GitHub at github.com/Marcus Ramberg Mojolicious introduction. You can find the source for the whole talk there. And yeah, so all the examples that you saw in my slides were just included directly from the exe folder in that thing. So you can find the examples, and they will be exactly the same as you saw in the slides. Yeah?
Is there a recommended way how to deploy your applications? You mentioned the Docker way, which is probably something that I would go for. But if you want to do Hypnotoad, is there
Well, if you're running your thing on a normal machine, I would recommend using Hypnotoad. That's what we're doing, and then you just write a simple in-system data script to start Hypnotoad, and there are examples for that in our cookbook as well. But for Docker, as I said, you would want to use a pre-forking deployment.
I see. And how do you get your application to the server? You pack it as a CPAN package?
Well, that's a little bit outside of Mojolicious scope. But what I'm doing is for Docker deployment, I'm using Drone to do a CI, and then Drone automatically builds a Docker image and ships that to our registry.
I see.
And we also have another CI that creates VM packages and ships that. So this is just normal Perl, and you can do whatever you use for all the Perl workflows. So I think that's all. We're out of time. Thank you very much.
One small question, not directly to Mojolicious, but about WebSockets. How is current situation with all those browsers? It's limited a lot, or?
Yeah, I think it's very well supported at this point. Like,
So we can use it
you can
now.
use it now on any modern browser. If you don't care about IA 8 or something, if you don't care about really old IA browsers, then you're fine. Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.